there everyone, and welcome to Planet Zoo. It's been a bit of a while since we last covered Planet Zoo on this channel, so for anyone who is not familiar with this game, it's basically Zoo Tycoon but more modern and better. Or if you played Jurassic World Evolution, it's that but with modern day animals. It's a really lovely game, and it has a sandbox mode, which thus enabled me to recreate Godzilla, because that is just what this game needed. Now, this all began with but a single toe, or a toe claw more like. I first begun this Godzilla build in February, and it is now June, nearly July in fact. I took a bit of a large break in between because I got a little bit burnt out. It was a very ambitious plan. But like I said, it all started with a single toe. This one toe just being one large, claw-looking rock, and it ended up setting the scale for the rest of the model. Since when it comes to Planet Zoo models, I don't really have any experience doing them. I kind of just, leap myself into it and just see how it goes. And for this one in particular, it just ended up becoming absolutely massive. I mean, it's kind of fitting really. I've been told that it looks, like a 1-to-1 scale, which was completely by accident. And it definitely made the entire thing extremely ambitious, but it's been fun, and it's something that I'm proud to say, that I have done. So like I said, I've never really done this before, and therefore my way of doing this is quite literally from the ground up, from the toes up to the head. I started off with the feet, which were already extremely large, and then when I moved on to the shins and thighs, already I came across the immediate issue that I'd made them a bit too kind of hunched over, a bit too bent, and it just looked very strange. So you'll see that for quite a while in this build, it looks like it's squatting. And because this build was so huge, it did make it a bit of a struggle to go back and forth and try to fix like a lot of the anatomy per se. I definitely did not aim for this to be accurate. I mean, it was meant to be, just Godzilla. And over the course of, all the many Godzilla movies, he's changed a lot. He's got a lot of different interpretations, but it's always, just that great big spiky lizard. That's what I was going for here. I did use the legendary one as my main reference, but it was always only meant to be, very loose, very, easily down to interpretation. Especially in a game like Planet Zoo, where it's definitely, Planet Zoo is awesome. It really allows you to get very creative, and what's really cool is that it allows you to make up your own props, your own statues, your own buildings, and you can upload them and share them with other players. But it definitely wasn't meant for this, and I can confirm that later on. So as I said, the sheer size of it did mean a couple of little hurdles in regards to just getting the general shaping in place. One of my main techniques for being able to do such a large build was after placing the initial foundations of a part, like say for example, I used the very large, long, narrow rocky piece. I'll then layer that into a much longer line, and then turn it into a panel, so basically it's just been duplicating it a lot and creating just large sheets of this repeated rock. And that was how I was able to create a lot of the structure in this model. You'll see a lot of it is duplicating. I duplicate it a lot in general, saves a lot of time as opposed to manually placing each and every single individual piece. Now saying that, while duplicating, I did indeed actually change the positioning or the angle of a lot of pieces, but it did just manage to massively cut down the time taken. Saying that, in total, in absolute recorded total, this took 9 hours. And as I mentioned, I began this in February and I finished it in June. So yes, 9 hours in total recorded, which would mean probably more something like, 15-20 hours, like if you take into account, not procrastinating per se, but like breaks in between and, chatting to a stream, chatting on Discord, etc. Trying to keep my sanity while doing this. It was definitely required. The model is, of course, hollow as well, for two reasons. Three reasons actually. One, it would have been a nightmare to place everything manually. Two, performance. And three, time. Performance definitely being, the biggest thing. Like, it would have been kind of useless to make it this great big solid structure. It just kind of made sense to make it hollow. But yeah, like the performance, that would have been a bit of an issue if this entire thing was filled out, from, fully from the inside. Now, it was around this stage here that I actually took my break, so this is where I ended off in February. And as you can see, we've got a nice big large legs, we've got the foundations of a tail, and a little bit of the belly. And at that point, I was very burnt out, because I'd also done a couple of models prior to this one, much smaller models, but still I'd been binging a lot of Planet Zoo at this time. And two, just seeing, the overall construction, the skeleton if you will, it was really daunting, and at this period of burnout, I just did not feel up for it. honestly, like, as happy as I am to have finished it, doing this was silly. It was really, really silly. Like, I'll be the first to admit it. This was completely overkill. But I did it, eventually, you know, a couple of months later. So like I said, a couple of months later, so I did always want to finish it. I had the idea in my head, I started with the foundations, we got the legs, the underbelly, a bit of the tail, it was all there and in place. I wanted to finish it. I was also very stuck in regards to how to do certain techniques, it's not just a tail, because when I first created a tail, it was just this very long, straight, rigid object. I didn't know how to shrink it, you know, efficiently, you know, obviously time effectively. I didn't want to waste too much time individually doing every single rock. So I wasn't sure at the time of taking my break how to make the tail kind of shrink over time, how to not make it look terribly long and rigid, just generally have it look more natural. So when I came back into it, back in June, that's when I decided just to keep on going, keep on duplicating as I mentioned before. We'll just get like this really long, solid, you know, basically like a snake, which would create like a great big snake of a tail. I'd duplicate the parts in chunks, so I'd say like about 4 or 5 segments, if you will, 4 or 5 rings of rocks. I would copy those at a time, and each time just shrink them all a little bit, and that would create the overall gradient. And then, when the tail was at a length that I liked, I then went ahead and kind of curved it very gradually. I'd selected the entire thing, kept selecting it up to a point, and reducing that selection each time I did a curve, and that would overall just, you know, create this large bend. For a long time, the bend was very crooked, and that was in part a little bit to laziness of not fixing it immediately. But I did end up fixing it though, and I think, in my opinion, in the final version, the tail just looks a lot more natural. I also ended up doing the same thing for the neck as well. When it came to the final posturing, and as like I said before, I was kind of making it up as I go along, I did end up kind of changing the position of the legs around a little bit, the positions of the arms, just kind of made it look not completely symmetrical, but I still wanted it to look like it was just, you know, standing. I didn't want it to be like in any sort of posture or animation or action. I wanted it to be standing because it's a really, really giant statue. It kind of needs to look like, not realistic per se, but structurally sound. I wanted it to not look stupid, you know, not look completely fragile is what I'm trying to say here. So in the end, I did keep it like this very relaxed standing posture, but I did have it roaring. Just kind of like somewhat roaring at the sky. You could almost imagine, like, you could put this in your own builds and like have it have a plasma blast coming out of its mouth if you wanted to. But like I did for the tail, where I slowly curved it, I did the same for the neck, where I slowly rotated it, and that way it just gave it just a little bit extra, you know, kind of dimension, a bit extra, you know, 3D dynamic, and that way it just wasn't, you know, kind of, not T-posing per se, but not in a really boring posture either. Honestly, I think the hardest part about this build was probably making the torso, because the torso, it was hard not to make like a huge barrel chest, and it was also kind of hard to introduce the proper curvature, because as I said earlier, you know, every time I want to change the size or width of something, I have to manually change the placement of every single individual rock. And as you can imagine, I didn't want to do that too often. But in the end, what allowed me to do it in a nice time-efficient manner was, like I did before with the tail, is to keep on duplicating segments, duplicating chunks. So you'll see like a lot of patterns, a lot of repetition throughout the model, which I actually kind of like. It almost looks like scales in a way, a lot of repetition, scales or spikes or whatever. And it just made it a lot easier to get the overall form and structure in place, just like really block out the shape initially, and then work on, you know, like all the little specifications, all the little, you know, the odd rock here and there that's out of place, then I can rotate it when the structure is in place. Saying that, not only was the chest kind of hard to do, but the neck as well, mostly because when I first made the neck, it was just really weirdly long, and I didn't know how to kind of merge the head into it. In the end, what I did was make the head an entirely separate piece, that way I could have it on the ground. I wouldn't have to worry about constantly, you know, kind of like bringing things up the x-axis or y-axis and, you know, kind of like constantly rotating, you know, like a mile up in the air. By building it all on the ground, it allowed it to be like in a more quantifiable range and allowed me to introduce more and more different rocks into it and be a lot more creative and dynamic. In the end, I elected to have different colours for the teeth and gums just to give it a bit more life, a bit more variety and more detail. Speaking of different coloured rocks, I also, towards the end, decided to change the colour of the spikes as well. So I've seen in quite a few images where Godzilla, when he's charging up his plasma ability, the base of his spines glow in this really cool blue hue. Now I decided to use some ice rocks for this, and I think at first it kind of looked really weird. It looked quite just bad, to be honest. But then I had faith in the idea, and when I kept on adding in more and more and more of his dorsal spikes with his blue lines inside it, in the end, it really came together really well, because as well as it just looking different and looking quite nice, it also really broke apart the monotony of the grey. The grey body makes sense. He's got a grey body anyway, and a lot of the natural shadows of the game really deal with that quite nicely. But with these spikes, I honestly think that if they didn't have the blue in it, they just kind of would have melded together and just looked very flat, very flimsy, and very boring overall. Whereas by introducing the blue into it, it breaks it apart and just makes it a bit more eye-catching, a bit more interesting to look at, and a bit more 3D. And I'd say my final hurdle as well was also, like I said earlier, kind of fixing up a part of the anatomy, in particular around the base of the tail. At some point, when I ended up curving the tail inwards, I'd somehow created like this really awkward bloat around the right thigh, which then made the portion of the tail on the left side kind of look really just weird and scrawny, so that was like a bit awkward to fix there. A lot of manual movement, but in the end we got there though. And in the end, after applying all the different levels of spikes and dorsal fins, which I absolutely love how they came out, we have our Godzilla. And I must say, doesn't he just look awesome in this setting, this lighting, this angle? I know it's a bit dramatic, but mate, I am just so happy that this came out. Like I mentioned, even though I took that large break from it, I found this was really just silly to do. It was really cool. Like, I feel so satisfied at completing it in the end. So, if we go ahead then and get rid of the snow, make it a bit more daytime. Oh, I apologise for the blinding there. I gotta say, I really do like the way that this game treats the weather and just how gradual, like, our lighting and such is. Go ahead and fast forward a little bit, get the snow to melt. And there we have it. There we have our Godzilla model. You can see, compared to my previous models, just how big it actually is. Like, from here, it looks a little bit small, I think. I mean, you can see the distance, but it's not really that impressive. But then, as we scroll out, when you look at it from this angle, it's an entirely different story. Oh, I just love how it looks, and I am really happy with the face as well. I think the face looks really good. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't really going for like any specific kind of version of Godzilla, just a general Godzilla face, or a model in general, and I just really like how it came out. Like, it's very iconic, I think. And as I mentioned before, using different colours on the mouth as well, I think it paid off. And just to have like a bit of an example here, friends, if we go ahead and grab our Rocky Rex, and let's just casually just grab this one here. And let's just see how it really compares in regards to size. Now, the Rocky Rex is pretty large by itself, to be honest. It's definitely much larger than a Rex would actually be in this game. But, yeah, as you can see there, it is severely dwarfed by Godzilla. Look at that. And like I mentioned, this all began with a single toe. I went with these rocks here, the Temperate Rock 17, which by itself isn't very big at all. I mean, we compare that to, say, a building. It's a decent sized rock. Okay, it is actually kind of large. My bad. I got it because of the shape. I like the shape of it, and I think it'd be like a really good, you know, claw shape. And, yeah. It definitely escalated from there, didn't it? Now, if we go ahead and just remove the Rocky Rex for a moment, I mentioned earlier about how Planet Zoo isn't built for this kind of stuff. And if I try to turn it into a blueprint, it won't let me. Well, actually, that one there. Blueprints cannot contain more than 4,000 scenery/building pieces, and this one has 5,057. I did try trimming it down, there's no point, so to get this into the workshop, I'm going to have to cut it in half. Hopefully that works out, we'll find out shortly. But yeah, like, as we get like a nice good old look at this, like I said, I'm just really happy with how it came out. Alright guys, I've got the best thing ever to show you. So I was just in the process here of turning it into a blueprint, just making sure it all works. I managed to get the first half into the blueprint perfectly fine. And by the way, it cost a fortune. And if I do the tail, it's actually 1337. I did not mean to do that. This is absolutely perfect. Alright then, so I've gone ahead then and loaded up the good old classic tutorial map. And let's just make sure that our Godzilla blueprints actually worked. There they are. It officially costs over $100,000, so I guess being able to add this into a zoo would be a true achievement. I think actually I've yet to play the game properly and see how the economy works. I promise I will play it properly soon. I will stop making models and play the game properly soon. But for the time being, oh my. Oh no, why? Okay. It's a lot bigger than I envisioned. And it's causing lag. But it worked! It placed. Oh, it's actually pretty good. In fact, performance-wise, it's actually really, really good. And let's just casually... Oh god, it even sinks in perfectly, just like that, like a glove. Bit of lag. There we go then. So, yeah. That's extremely overkill. Oh, I feel so silly. What enclosure is it just like enclosed upon? I can't even see the animals in here. Oh no. What enclosure is this? Okay, so it's for hippos. So it's just yeah, the hippo enclosure is now the Godzilla enclosure. Right. Oh, what about over here? The ostriches are fine. The ostriches are chilling. In fact, they've now got, you know, like a bit of a natural shading. In fact, look at that. Nice big old natural roofing right here. How lovely, how quaint, you know, prevent them from getting sunburns or anything like that. If we move on over here, he's managed to just barely dodge the Missy Good entrance toilets. Oh, how kind. Yeah, he's dodged toilets, how kind. His toe is like perfectly encroaching here. This is wonderful. I really should make some buildings. The buildings in this game are beautiful. I gotta do more than just make Godzilla. But yeah. Well, there you go then, friends. There is Godzilla in his natural habitat. A city, or more like a zoo in this case. As I mentioned earlier, I will be making it into a blueprint. Like, the blueprint right now is, you know, a bit of a draft. I'll make it properly. It'll be uploaded into the workshop so you can have this for yourselves. It'll be in the video description as well, so you can enjoy it for yourselves. It will have to be separated into part 1 and part 2, so bear that in mind. And of course, you know, any potential performance issues. I have no idea if that's a thing or not. But if you do decide to go ahead and download this, I really hope that you enjoy it. Oh dear, it was fun making, but now I'm glad I get to move on to something else. As always, thank you all very, very much. Let me know what you think, and let me know what else you'd like to see. If you want to see, you know, more statues, preferably smaller, but you never know, maybe like, imagine Ghidorah? I'm kidding. Let me know if you want to see anything more, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day, and take care. Cheers.